Welcome to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. I am really thrilled about the news we're going to be making today. We've got Dr. Diehl Hudson, a dear friend of the Schlapps, and you, Matt, you both have written this book. It's going to be coming out in February. It's called The Desecrators. Don't even have me translated that into Spanish because I'm going to have to look that up, which is defeating the cancel culture mob and reclaiming one nation under God. This is an exciting endeavor. So,
Desecrados? How would you say
so.
it?
I think so.
I think that would be it.
Diehl, it's great to have you on CPAC Now.
And I have to say, I'm very thankful we did it. We got the book written. It looks beautiful, has a great cover, has a great introduction, and I want to thank you, Mercedes, for the very kind things you said to me in the introduction.
Book really is a work of not only the heart and soul of what you both have experienced, but also just the ability for you all to talk about your experiences in terms of what is happening in America and your viewpoints on what's happening in America. So I'd like to dig in, and this is very exciting for me because let me tell you something. I've been interviewed by Diehl Hudson, as has Matt Schlapp. He is one of the toughest interviewers. I mean, forget Chuck Todd, forget Jake Tapper. Diehl is the toughest because he puts you into these like uncomfortable scenarios where you're going, wait a second, did I answer the question right or wrong? So this is like, this is my turn now.
Yeah,
okay?
That's right.
Okay, well, let's first talk. I'll go to you first, Diehl. Why did you think it was important to write a book like this right now in America?
Because every morning I get up and read the news and then I throw up.
Yeah.
And we all do. I mean, there are millions of us across America. Writing this book gave me a chance to reflect on my now 72 years as an American and looking at the difference between the values that were taught to me as a young man, not just by my family, but by my church, by my all the schools I was in. There were a lot of them. It's very hard to recognize in the madness that we're living through day by day, every day, the America to which I was born, in which I was born, and which I was raised. And a lot of people, not just us, but it's time for everyone to stand up against it and proclaim what is wrong and what is right. And that's what Matt and I have done in this book.
Matt, what was your thought process when you all decided, okay, I'm going to move forward, we're going to write this book together? What were you thinking? Why do you think it was important to do that now?
So I tried to write in the introduction to the book how the book came about. But, you know, as you do with everything like that, I ended up cutting that piece out because there were so many other things to get to in the introduction so that the reader could understand why we wrote this book. And the reason I wrote this book is quite honestly because Diehl came and visited us with this late, great publisher at TAN. And we sat in our conference room right down the hall here. And Diehl said, I think we need to collaborate on this book. We need to tell the story of Trump getting involved in politics and all this change in America and exactly what Diehl just described, so much of what's happening in America where we've slipped, where we've fallen, where we're not what we once were. And I felt like, Diehl, because you approached me and because TAN is obviously publishes a lot of Catholic books and understands the spiritual nature of the conflict we're in as a country. But the fact that you approached me gave me, we talked about writing a book. You and I have talked about writing one together. We've talked about it so many times. And it just, the doors opened and it seemed like I could see a way to get it done. So thank you, Diehl, for...
even though all your staff advised you against it.
Did they in that meeting?
They did. You don't have time. You don't have time.
That's true. They did say that.
Matt doesn't have time. That's what they kept telling me.
We didn't write a book together because we want to preserve our marriage, Diehl. So I'm glad that you took the lead in working with Matt to get this book done because it is a labor of love. It does take so much time to write the book, and sometimes I think it's hard to even be able to put your emotions and your experiences on paper. Like you lived through it. It's been painful. And then all of a sudden you have to bring this all back up. Is there one part of the book that you really feel strongly that is one particular message that you think readers will find interesting?
Well, I think first of all, the things that Matt wrote on his own were all deeply moving to me. The experiences you guys had being Trump supporters and you, Mercedes, being in the administration. I wasn't aware of the kind of pounding you guys were taking, although I should have known it. I'm sure I could have imagined it if I had thought what you were put through. But also the fact that we came sort of collectively to the notion that what's really going on here is rejection of the sacred. The sacredness of our existence, the sacredness of our great traditions, Judeo-Christian traditions in the West. The sacredness of life, of course, has been so soundly rejected in this country, and especially in the Democrat Party, that we're all accused of being one issue folks when we're not, because if you care about life, you care about everything. Because everything that is impacts life, both before it's born and afterward. So we came to the name desecrators to describe people who were actively and explicitly and intentionally seeking to remove all traces of the sacred and all belief and conviction about there being a sacredness of life which underlies everything.
Diehl, that's beautifully said, and I think you're so right, and I think it's the challenge that we're facing right now. Matt, when you were writing the book, was there one moment that really stood out for you in terms of, what you want the readers to get out of this book?
Well, I want to say something about the title, The Desecrators. That was Diehl's idea, and we were really married to this idea of cancel culture, and he's the one who kind of, in his own writing, realized that we weren't just talking about cancel culture in some kind of objective way. We were talking about the destruction of everything sacred, as he just said. And what you begin to realize, so many times in school, we're taught to think that somehow America's secular and then a lot of Americans are religious. And we forget this idea that the very notion of having an America was wrapped around theology and right and wrong and divine providence. I mean, you can't know the story of America without, understanding this idea that God has a plan.
Right. And
men simply follow that plan. And
right.
Sometimes we don't, by the
right.
way. So to me, I thought the title was interesting. I think titles, it's funny, as you know, Diehl, you've done a ton of media. Mercy and I do a ton of media. The words you choose really matter.
Right.
Titles matter. How you summarize something really matters. And I think for me, the thing that was hard for me was reliving, the Donald Trump in our lives. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's a lot of Americans who have that same feeling, but Donald Trump appeared in our lives. He appeared in my life because he wanted to talk with me about politics, and he wanted to, talk about running for president and all these things. And it was like this most fascinating of exchanges from the very beginning. Because as a kid, my parents were New Yorkers. My grandfather had done business with his father. I don't know to what extent, but at least a little bit. And I walked into that office, which is the office the way it's always looked, probably for 35 years, and started having these exchanges, and it brought a lot back about what this journey has been like for us as a couple, for me personally, and for the country. And it's wrapped with a lot of emotion because I believe Donald Trump, if America is to be saved, Donald Trump has had a lot to do with saving it.
Diehl,
exactly.
Yeah, no, I agree. Diehl, Matt, we're going to be right back, so you all stay with us. And guess what? You can actually pre-order this book, and we've got the link up on the screen for you all. The book is called The Desecrators, Defeating the Cancel Culture Mob and Reclaiming One Nation Under God. Stay with us.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Schlapp with CPAC, and it's my privilege to tell you that we've got a very important project that we've just announced, the First Amendment Fund. It's a brand new fund that we've created through our criminal justice reform efforts to raise money to take care of you, Americans who are being canceled and desecrated out there around the country. We know it just happened in Virginia, where parents were called domestic terrorists by the Biden administration, where people who just want to express their political views are canceled left and right. Now we have this terrible specter of a vaccine mandate where you can lose your job or be prevented from going to a restaurant or go to school according to your vaccination status. These are all the things that are happening in this country that are making people realize that America is in a fight to defend the principles that have made her great. If you want to be involved in this important effort, please go to conservative.org, click the link for the First Amendment Fund. Please donate to this C3 to help these victims across the country, including those who are just involved in politics, to make sure they have the legal representation they need to be able to live their great American life.
Welcome back to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. I'm joined with two of my favorite people, Dr. Diehl Hudson and, of course, my better half, Matt Schlapp, authors of The Desecrators. When is this book coming out?
It should be coming out right before CPAC, which, of course, we've already announced is going to be in Orlando, February 24th through the 27th. You can pre-order the book, but you'll be able to get it. Hold it in your hand. We'll have all kinds of book signings, not just for our book deal, but for all the great conservative books. We'll have a lot of authors there signing books. It's one of the really great parts of CPAC is you get a chance to actually sit and talk to a lot of these authors and have them sign your book.
Yeah. And so, Diehl, as we've seen in this book, one of the areas you really hone in on is what's happening with our churches, with these institutions, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, when you were writing the book, what were you finding? What were you discovering in terms of what our church institutions have been able to do to, first of all, ensure that this cancel culture mob doesn't destroy the church, but at times we do see these weaknesses within the church?
We're talking about Catholics, for example. We have to distinguish between the individual bishops and the bishops' conference. And the conference, as I discuss in the book, or we discuss, has done nothing to oppose this because they've been so bought by the Democrat Party, all the millions of dollars they're getting to keep immigrants coming over the border. They house them, they transport them, they put them in various cities, and this is being done on the federal dollar by the Catholic bishops. But I mean, there are individual bishops here and there. Bishop Strickland is one in Tyler, Texas, who have fought these things as they've come along. But as a whole, the institution that we call the Catholic Church in this country, and I won't even get into the Vatican, has done nothing to challenge this. Now, what's very important to see, as we discuss in the book, that the idea of canceling culture, that is the idea of turning your back and ignoring or negating the traditions of the West. Of course, the Catholic Church goes around the world, but we're talking about America, part of the West, is that you've really negated the Catholic Church altogether, because what distinguishes the Catholic Church among all Christian groups is its belief in tradition, that God continues to reveal himself, the word continues to unpack itself through the centuries of the church. So once you've done away with tradition, you've done away with the sacred deposit of the Catholic Church. Now, evangelicals, of course, have done wonderfully. I mean, they've supported pro-life presidential candidates like 82%, 78% over the years. And church-going Catholics have also supported presidential candidates like they did President Bush and they did President Trump. But when you come to the average Catholic who's unchurched, not going to Mass, they behave and they have opinions like the general public does. So what we find on the religious side is a very mixed kind of soup of centers of very profound pro-life activism, pro-Catholic, pro-Christian activism, pro-Jewish activism, We could talk about the Mormons. They've been a great asset to the conservative cause. And then, but this leadership, including the seminaries, particularly the seminaries, the place where ministers and priests are educated, pretty well lost to the cause.
Right. Matt, is there a story in, you've obviously dealt with the President Trump multiple times. Is there one story that really stands out, something that you put in the book that you found really defined the president or gave a glimpse of who the president really is?
Well, I think sometimes when you would come home and talk about what happened, during the day, some of these days were historic to say the least.
Right.
That really brought things home. But I thought it was interesting whenever I talked to the president. I can't say one, but I say generally. Here's the thing I just wish more people would understand. He's the only important person I've ever known who, when you call him, he tries to call you back. Now, important people usually have a system, right? And somebody will reach out to you and say, oh, Deal or Mercy, I know you called and he's very busy and he wanted me to touch base with you. And that could happen with President Trump, as you know, but I mean, a lot of times he just called you.
Right.
And it kind of reminds me in the old days, the realtors used to have the business cards and they're on the phone, and that was like a big business card thing, like in the 1970s and maybe the early 1980s.
No, I don't remember that, Schlepp. I don't know what you're talking about.
Or if you watched movies from the 1980s, there'd be the big shot guy in the back of the limo with the car phone, and the car phone literally had a wire on it. Like, that's who the man is. Like, he wants to be connected to as many different people.
Yeah. All day long and all night long and all morning long. There really was no executive time. Executive time just meant making a lot of these calls. And for that reason, I don't think he ever really had the bubble. They talked about President Bush having a bubble where it was Karl Rove and Andy Card and Alberto Gonzales. And he had Margaret Spelling's 4 or 5 advisors that just were around him. And to break through those advisors was impossible. Right. And even as a staffer, unless you had a meeting with him and you could say, sir, you got to know this. It was hard to break through, and Trump just never allowed that to happen, which I think accrued to his benefit. I don't think it made it in. What, go ahead. I just want to say, Deal, do you agree with that?
I completely, and I think that the fact is we have a 24-hour cable news propaganda machine. Point. And so the fact that President Trump was on his Twitter, that he was making statements, that he was appearing around the country to rapturous audiences, was his way of combating this 24-hour propaganda machine. And I think it takes someone with Trump's audacity, his outrageousness, if you want to call it that, and his just energy. My God, I just turned 72. I couldn't do half the things he does. But he is a remarkable man for that. And of course, when you operate in with that kind of intensity, you're gonna say some things and do some things that aren't the best. But what you've got unfortunately are people out there who even share his views, who take those 1 or 2 things and judge the man based upon that, as if you are without sin or you are without missteps in life. I think for the kind of public scrutiny Trump has been under, and his family, he's done remarkably well.
And Deal, this is something that comes out in the book that I think is one of the best parts of the book. You and me, we've obviously lived different lives. We've known each other a long time. But one of the themes of the book is that don't allow the left to shut you up because you've made mistakes. We've all made mistakes. We've all made serious mistakes. We've all done things that we regret. And if you're a conservative and you've done those things, you're supposed to cower and retire to a monastery into the shadows. Yeah, and they want to crucify you. And they want to kill you. And when someone on the left makes mistakes, they pop out for 4 or 5 days and get some counseling, and then they're right back with a television sitcom or something. And right. I would just say for all of you, we said it, and you said it well in the book, Deal, don't wear their shame. Yeah, I think that's great advice.
And there's that thorn of Puritanism in American culture, which makes sexual sin or drinking, anything that's involves pleasure, puts it on the same say, hierarchy with pride, envy, anger, and wrath. And you never hear anyone, politician as it were, excoriated for their pride or their envy, right? Which are the worst of the seven deadly sins. It's only when a conservative trips over the sexual thing or the money thing or the drinking thing, drug thing, that the media just goes aflame over it.
Right. There's almost like two different standards for what Republicans have and Democrats have. I think that's a very, very fair point. But we are going to be right back with the authors of The Desecrators, Matt Schlapp and Diehl Hudson. And remember, you can pre-order this book and go to the link that you see on the screen. We'd love to get your feedback on the book. And I got to tell you, it really is a quick read. And it just has some really, really fascinating and unique stories. So stay with us. Okay, we're back with Dr. Diehl Hudson and Matt Schlapp, now authors of The Desecrators. We can't wait for this book to come out. You can pre-order it. So remember to get that link that we have on the screen. But Diehl, let me ask you, so you've had folks read it. What's their reaction so far?
Well, I wanted to tell you that I had somebody read it who I trust, who is conservative, Catholic, and loves President Trump. Who's read all my other books, and she said it's the best book I've ever written.
Oh, wow. That is so exciting.
And you've written more than a couple.
Yeah.
Matt then is responsible for taking me to the next level.
Oh, well, I take Matt to the next level, so I get it, Diehl. Don't worry. I'm always
and we owe Diehl, we made a bargain that if you actually were able to get me focused, to get my portions of the book done, that we would buy you a beautiful bourbon-colored Stetson hat.
Oh, yes.
So that's your Christmas present from the Schlapps, Diehl.
We're going to send it your way, so when you go on the book tour, you'll take it with you. So it'll be perfect. But,
Well, I really look forward to working with you guys to getting this book the kind of attention it deserves.
Well, we look forward to doing that as well. And I will say, I had the great honor of writing the foreword, and one of the things I remember is that when you were all brainstorming on the book and we were having conversation, we'd always sit on the front porch, and we would have the most fascinating philosophical conversations. Diehl would be smoking a cigar, Matt would be smoking a cigar. It was just this opportunity to really just sit and think for a little bit on the state of affairs in our country. And I always say this is happening across America. People are sitting on their front porches, looking outside, saying, what is happening? And will God save us? Will God save our country? Will God protect our children? What you're seeing now, I want to get your reaction, Diehl. In terms of what you're seeing now, in terms of where our politics, the political wave is going, do you think that Americans are finally waking up?
I do. And I think people around the world are waking up. And I know that CPAC is going to be going around the world. And I think you're going around the world at just the right moment because of these imperial COVID restrictions have made people aware of the exercise of state power, which up to now they've accepted. But now that they've used the state power for such totally unnecessary reasons almost, it seems like, just to have the pleasure of exerting power over people, it is clear to people here in this country and around the world that this slide toward socialist dictatorship has to come to an end.
On the porch, most times it was you and me. Diehl was there for some really important visits, and Diehl brought some friends who helped us think through the book as well. I also feel like when you talk about tradition, there's a dignity to life too, and I think during this last 2 years we've lost some of that dignity. We talked about wearing a nice hat or a gentleman still having the old-fashioned notion that it's okay to put on a coat and tie, and you don't have to walk everywhere in yoga pants. And when I want to get a martini,
what's wrong with yoga pants, Schlapp? I like yoga pants.
When I want to have a martini, it should be in a martini glass and not a Dixie cup because they're so scared to wash dishes during COVID. We've lost a dignity to life that I think we need to teach our kids that that's okay. It's okay to break out the good stuff, and it's okay to celebrate, and we should do that on holidays, and we should do that when we're with good friends. And let's rekindle that in people. Not everything has to be so casual, right, and so informal. And some things we need to just kind of class it up a bit. You agree, Deal?
We learn with our eyes. And when your children see you going to the trouble of dressing for Mass, when your children see you going to the trouble of sitting down to dinner, praying, when your children see the way you interact with people when you have your parties in your home, which are so wonderful, when they see the respect you show for other people, when they see the joy that both of you have brought to so many people's lives in both your work, but just in being a family, that's called passing on a tradition. And that's why, Matt, I think it's so important that you and Mercy continue to be the kind of couple you've been.
Oh, well, we appreciate that. We feel the same way about you.
You got a lot on your shoulders there, kiddo.
I know. I do want to get your reaction, Deal, on the role the media has played thus far in really supporting this cancel culture mob. We've seen it across the board with the liberal media. Do you think that they're just going to continue down this lane of propaganda, or will we find a way back to sort of this objective centrist media?
We eventually will. And the reason will be money. Because you've seen how few viewers, channels like MSNBC, MSCBS, CNN.
MSNBC.
You just can't get yourself to say
they're all
CNN.
The same. Let me tell you, they're all the same.
Great. And how long can these organizations continue to absorb those monetary losses? There's another reason is that people, Disney has lost its clout among families. It's ruined its brand. And now its channel is in danger of going under. Imagine Disney Channel not being able to make it on subscriptions from parents who want their kids to watch Disney's products. So I think there is, fortunately, a correction in the works. But what's so odd is that no matter how history turns one way or the other, events turn one way or the other, the heads of these media organizations continue to allow their talking heads to say things that are totally lies, totally nonsense, and don't pass the sniff test when it comes to telling the truth. They almost seem to have a suicide wish.
Yeah, and I think Americans are really turning away from this just completely leftist news, and they're just not buying it, and they're actually raising a lot of questions onto whether they can actually believe what the news source is telling them. Matt, let me get your quick reaction as we close off the segment, but what's your sense in terms of where we're headed with the media, and when you were writing this book in really understanding what their role has been?
There's only two good things about the Chinese corona pandemic. The first thing is a lot of parents started listening to what was going on in classrooms on Zoom calls, and it created this great unwokening that's happening in the country, where parents just said, "My God, I didn't know it was like this." And the second thing that happened is what Mercy and I did. I'm going to use an old-fashioned gesture. We turned it off. We turned off the television because as we watched the insanity of the coverage over the Black Lives Matter riots, where they wouldn't say Black Lives Matter, they wouldn't ascribe any blame, this was a justified outrage, killing cops and killing young black kids, it's justifiable somehow, the violence, because people are upset. And we just, both of us, and our kids too, we just stopped watching. And I think that could be the greatest thing for America. Perhaps we'll be more judicious when we turn on the television, what we fill what we fill our intellect up with. I think we'll be more careful.
We ended up reading more, reading the classics. We ended up praying more as a family. And I think at the end, it really has helped strengthen our family. And, I think that we're learning that it really is these gifts from God, prayer and family time, and knowing that that's what's important. It's that core as a family.
Deal, when I get up in the morning now, I guess I'm of a certain age, I have to have my coffee, and I have to have quiet. And we have a lot of kids, and we still have a lot of chaos in our household, but I always want to grab, usually it's on the front porch off our kitchen, and we'll listen to the Bible verses for that day, the readings, or look through these wonderful people that send me scripture to read every morning, and I need to do it in silence. And I think that is a good indicator, and I think more of us need to spend time in silence and to be contemplative. Sometimes it's only for 7 or 8 minutes, maybe even less some days. But I think all of the chaos around us is going to get us back to these fundamental ideas.
Because in silence, you listen to God.
Right.
In silence, you listen to the deepest reserves of your own soul and the light that shines there. I'm sorry to wax a little poetic and theological,
That's
but
the truth.
Silence is where we meet the things that we need to really listen to.
The biggest silence is that television set, or that that stereo system, or whatever, and sometimes
TikTok, or Snapchat, or I could go by the whole list. But I want to thank both of you. It's really been an honor to be actually part of the process, and seeing both of you write this book with so much heart, with so much inspiration, and I really hope that our viewers can enjoy this book and learn from it. I think that's the key as well. And so
most important thing is to learn.
That is absolutely right. And the book is called The Desecrators. You can again pre-order it. Matt and Deal will be signing the books over in CPAC Orlando. And I want to leave you all with our interview where Deal Hudson interviewed both Matt and myself back in CPAC Dallas. So just want y'all to take a look at this interview. It was so much fun, although he did keep us on our toes, right?
For sure. For sure.
So let's take a look.
Please welcome, from the American Conservative Union Foundation, Mercedes Schlapp. Chairman of the American Conservative Union, Matt Schlapp, and your host, from Ave Maria Radio, Deal Hudson.
So it's been 21 years since we met.
Oh, boy.
Has it been 21 years?
21 years.
And you two went gray. I'm still hanging in there.
Well, you guys are so busy, and you're being so productive and doing such great work for our nation. Do you ever have time for pillow talk?
Are you thinking the Mike Lindell pillows?
I know, I'm wondering. What do you talk about
It's
at
just
night?
Mercy, me, and Mike Lindell. That's all it is.
Do you ever make it light?
We actually have a lot of fun. I think the one thing that is great about our family generally is I'm looking over here to Grandma and my sister, and has anybody got a chance to meet my
And your
mom
nephew.
and Tommy? No matter what happened in our lives, Mom, we always laughed. We always had fun. We always saw the ironic. And I think it's one of the things that we have in common, which is 5 years of a lot of tension during the Trump years. They didn't treat all of us that well. I don't know if you all noticed, but we'd still find time to find something to laugh at. And I think that's very important, because God didn't put us on this earth to be miserable every moment of every day. You got to have some fun while you're doing it.
Well, and think about it. When you have kids or nieces and nephews, they They make you laugh.
Yes.
So our 9-year-old, Lucia, is the funniest schlap we have ever met in our lives. She's hysterical.
That's poetic, the funniest schlap.
She really
But,
is.
you know, Matt and I just wrote a book together that'll be out in January called, we haven't decided whether it's the Desecrators or the Great Desecration, which is, you know, a defense of our nation against those who are to steal our faith, our tradition, our values, our founding principles. And I learned a lot from what Matt wrote about what they've been through, you know, in these years when they were Trump supporters, and you've been building this organization so powerfully, both of you. And so celebrity is a double-edged sword, isn't it? On the one hand, you're admired and you get applause. On the other hand, there's always that sword that can come down. How have y'all handled that?
I think it's through our faith. I start my day with the daily readings, and it really puts things into perspective. And actually, the day that we started CPAC, and I sent this over to you and to several others, it was the whole thing of Jesus saying, you're going to have, you know, people are going to go after you. They're going to persecute you. There will be insults. But you know that the Lord is with you, that God is with you. And I feel that it really has been through our faith and our really supportive family, and that family extends. The one thing is, when you're part of CPAC, you're part of a family. And that extends to the fact that you have this network of people that come up to you all the time and say, I'm praying for you. You really do feel the prayers.
I mean, I'm not going to get into a Bible quoting contest because I will lose. But we
would have to be Baptists to be really good.
No, and Theo will have to help us because he's the professor. But, you know, it said where I allow you to feel weak because when you're weak, I'm your strength.
Right.
And the problem is we all think that we're going to muscle through this on our own muscle and brain power, and you all are very impressive, but what will make us powerful is understanding there has to be a divine plan, so we're not going to get it done.
You know, we've been talking about this attempt to take away our history and our traditions, all of which make up who we are, literally our identity, make up our values, make up our principles and our vision of life. Matt, start with you. What event in American history inspires you on a daily basis, but in your work?
Well, you know, it's a good question. I could go a lot of directions. We just some of us just got like a whole history lesson last night, and I know Glenn Beck's going to be here to really talk about. Amazing guy.
I know they look alike sometimes. It's really weird.
He has more style. I mean, I don't know how he does all that linen and stuff. But anyway, I have to say that this whole question about how we treat people and civil rights and how we recovered from our birth defect of slavery, I have to say that kind of sticks with me all the time because you'd have to have a very special group of faith-filled people to acknowledge a terrible sin instead of avoiding it to deal with it. Now, we dealt with it in terrible ways and a terrible war, but we did figure out how to still be America.
500,000 people died to free the slaves on the northern side.
Yeah.
And they tell us we're a racist nation.
Well, let me tell you something, and I don't want to steal any thunder, so I'll be careful with what I say here, but you know, we say it all the time, but I was working with the team, and I was like, I know what they're teaching our kids is wrong about civil rights. And as a Republican, you know, your father, my grandfather, his favorite president was Abraham Lincoln. Why was Abraham Lincoln his favorite president? Because Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, believed in civil rights, and he believed that each one of us, and he came from a pretty humble station, each one of us, and Abraham Lincoln came from a humble situation, could rise in this country. Now, they didn't really understand this whole idea of racial tolerance, kind of like we do today. The problem is today we don't understand it. We've lost the lesson. Now it's all about America is a crappy place that you can't rise in, especially if you're a person of color. And we have to beat that dead. That is wrong.
We have to remember the sacrifices that Americans have made and on what principles they were made, on what fundamentally Christian and natural law principles that these men and women sacrificed their life. Who inspires you?
Ugh. He's going to make me cry.
I mean, it can't, not him. It has to
No, not Schlapp. No, I'm kidding. Actually, can I tell you, he is such the hardest worker you could ever imagine, and a great fighter for our nation, and a great dad, and a fabulous husband, and the best friend you could ever have. Seriously, he's fantastic. But, you know, the person who inspires me, I have a lot of people who inspire me, but definitely it has to be my father.
Oh.
He's
we interviewed on the radio about him.
So he's 85 years old, and some of you who have gone to several CPACs, he was in Cuba and grew up in Cuba, and he was, really built up a business, was very excited, multiple businesses, and he ended up, when Fidel Castro came in, they took everything away from my dad. And my dad really had the two options of saying, do I just stay quiet as they destroy my nation, or do I stand up and fight? And he stood up and he fought. And he joined a counter-revolutionary group and ended up in jail for 6 years. Many of his friends were executed. Many of his friends served jail terms up to 20 years because of the communist and the dictatorship. And then he came to America and he built his life here, raised his children here. And you ask him today, are you a Cuban American? And he says, no, I'm an American. He loves his country so much, and he reminds me every day that it takes hard work and sacrifice, and that we all have an obligation to protect these fragile freedoms that we have in America, because you can lose a country in a matter of decades. And I will tell you one other thing. I know everyone's freaked out about the academic institutions and all these liberal institutions and companies, but it starts at the kitchen table, because that is where you have the conversations with your children. That is where I learned that God was calling me to do something greater, to be able to be a messenger for freedom and a protection of this country.
And now I have a philosophical question. I have a philosophical question. I once wrote a book about the idea of happiness. And the one thing that I found, all the great commentators on happiness said, you really never know whether you have a happy life until you're towards the end of it. It's like an athletic game. You don't really know who's going to win until the end of the fourth quarter or the end of the ninth inning. A lot of people say we are losing our nation, or we've lost it, we're in the process of losing it. If we're talking about an 18-hole golf course, what hole are we on in terms of the process of trying to save our nation?
I don't play golf, so this is going to be very complicated for me. I might need some help from the audience. Go ahead, Schlapp.
Matt, where are we?
I just hope I get a touchdown and one. I would say, I don't like saying that. Rick Grinnell said right here this morning that great civilizations have lasted around 2.5 centuries. And boy, I don't like to hear that, because that's kind of right where we are. I'd say, unfortunately, if we stay on the present course, I fear we're on about the 16th hole.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's what I would have said. How many of you would have said 16?
Wow.
What? Anybody else say front nine?
17.
17. You're a pessimist. You mentioned it starts at the kitchen table, Mercy. And here you have organizations like Black Lives Matter, and even in the Equality Act, It's an attack on the family and the attack on the parental relationship, especially the mother between the children. Now, we all know the fiercest love of all, natural love, is that between a mother and a child. As C.S. Lewis said, if your dog bites your neighbor's child, you don't want to face the mother, you want to face the dad. Why is it that the left, the desecrators, are trying to destroy this natural parental love, especially mother's love, for their children?
Because they don't believe in individual thought. It's about collective thought. It is exactly what Karl Marx has been pushing. They never wanted the family to succeed. It was always about government control of what you think, what you believe, what you can do, because that's how you control the masses. And that's exactly what you're seeing with the leftist playbook, what you're seeing with organizations like Black Lives Matter that are using this talent of this theme of Black Lives Matter to push a Marxist radical agenda.
An atheist agenda.
And guess what? The families are pushing back.
Is in the way.
It is the organic grassroots, the parents saying, you are not going to teach my children this crap. You are not going, to push controversial sex education at schools because they want to be the moral crusaders for our children. They want to dictate what propaganda our children see.
And they're doing it through sexuality.
Yes.
I mean, they're trying
at the youngest of ages.
So, Matt, the larger question that we raised in our book is, why is there this sort of full force and broad attack on Christianity specifically?
Well, I think we have Christopher Columbus in the title of this talk. If you think about the American founding, we have a Constitution and we think it's all about civics and government. The Constitution, as we all know, in the Declaration of Independence, and we just heard in the Smithsonian that they think it's problematic for those two documents to reside in the rotunda without explaining that it was just the work of white guys.
Trigger warnings. They call them the trigger warnings.
Our Constitution and our founding documents and our founding is not about government. Our founding is about a statement that we're not going to be following the divine right of a king. We understand that the individual has these rights inscribed in their soul by their creator. And really, it's much more, our founding and our founding documents are much more about what would be the real force in society. Individual rights and tolerance, families and taking up the next generation of children, and understanding that faith, which is right in that First Amendment. The press always thinks the First Amendment was written for them. They come much later in the First Amendment. It's all about our ability to practice our faith, not practice our faith. Choose which faith we want to observe. And that's really what our founding principle documents are about. These institutions, the family, church, nonprofits, civic organizations, that's why each one of these entities is subject to the attack. And they've been able to turn almost every nonprofit organization, not CPAC yet. I am drawing a line in the sand. You're not going to, no hands off CPAC. But they've been able to turn a lot of these nonprofit organizations and families and churches.
You know, I was in higher education when the liberals took over. I had no idea the liberals were up to what they were up to, that is to completely destroy us who were not.
You thought they were the tolerant ones.
Yes.
And they're not.
No, they preach it, but they don't practice it. Multiculturalism isn't about multiculturalism. It's about our understanding of what truth and what basic political principles are. But Mercy, you've homeschooled, right?
I'd be a horrible homeschool teacher.
But you had to during the pandemic.
I did. During COVID, I did. And let me tell you, 5th grade math is a lot harder than you people think,
It's
okay?
true.
Lot harder. I was having the 18-year-old going, I'm like, can you sit down with your sister Ava and get this done?
How can you as parents be you're supposed to be by right, both natural and by Christian, the educators of your children. That's your right, your privilege, no one else, right? What do you do? What are you going to do as they grow older to keep them from being propagandized and being alienated from you?
Well, can I just, okay.
What do you want me to say? No, you can't talk.
Just say yes, dear. Yes, dear.
You guys understand.
No, so when we first got to CPAC, we met these two wonderful moms, Maureen and Karen. I'm not sure if see, they're right there. Woo! Shout out. And they brought their son and daughter, Jimmy and Charlotte.
Where is Jimmy and Charlotte? They're getting pizza.
They gotta eat.
Okay.
And they're home. We were talking about homeschool moms, and God bless homeschool moms. Because what they realized is that the public school system is failing our children, and parents are saying, we need to take control and take this back. And let me tell you something, bringing your children or your grandchildren or nieces and nephews to CPAC is a great way for them to learn. And we have our online show, CPAC Now, 3 times a week. Our goal is continue to expand conservative programming online to reach our children as well, reach the adults, to keep talking about the facts and push back against the leftist propaganda.
Yeah. And we've come to the end of our time.
Oh, give
But
Matt like 2 seconds. You gotta just let him give one.
I want to say one thing to both of you. When we wrote this book together, you tell everybody I did most of the work.
That's true.
But I want to tell you it was a privilege to do it, for me personally, because I see what you're doing. I see that you are working, 24/7, that you are sacrificing your personal time for the sake of our nation, this organization. So it was a privilege for me to be of service to getting you in print. You did a lot of writing, and we put it in a wonderful shape, and I think that when this book comes out in January, people are going to like it.
I think they are too. I think people keep asking me, like, you asked what hole we're on in the golf course of life, and where is America and all this. And all I can tell you is the following. We went to Hong Kong. We protested with those kids. They were young. I couldn't believe how young. I don't know if Gordon and Lydia are here. I can't believe how young these people were. And to all the young people here, a lot of kids here in college and high school and even younger, it's on your shoulders. And I tell my kids all the time, I'm sorry. We've left you a country in a terrible situation. And it was wrong for us to not wake up earlier to what they were doing. But we can still make it right. We can still get it done. And they're going to have to lead the way. So let's get out there and fight for America. Thank you. Thanks.